Valence is the third question in the EIV model. The valence question deals with, okay, I put forth the effort, I perform, I get what's coming to me as a result of performing, then is this outcome really worth it to me as an individual? In other words, what is the value to me of the outcome of successfully performing the goal? Valence is investigated using a process called value mapping. This involves comparing the value one perceives in the outcomes associated with successful accomplishment of the task or the goal with one's own personal values. In other words, an individual basically values certain things, and the individual perceives that the value of successful completion of the goal then contains certain things. And the question for you, the leader, is to what degree does the person's values line up with what they value as it relates to successful completion of the goal? The leader should examine the value map for insights into where and why the employees may answer the third question, is it worth it, with a yes or a no. The value map consists of the following needs and values. Need for achievement or competence. In other words, the individual's desire to achieve at high levels or to be seen or found as competent. Their need for power or control. Their need for affiliation or relationships or social interaction. These three needs are found in McClellan's work on individuals' basic needs that must be supplied. There are other needs, however, that we have found through study of organizational behavior. For instance, the need for fun or enjoyment or pleasure. This is the hedonistic needs of individuals. The need for freedom or flexibility, or the freedom of choice or determining one's own destiny. The need for money, such as what money is or represents. The need for a person's job to fulfill themselves, or the need for a person's work to provide them with purpose, challenge, or status. You will receive in the value mapping a value score for each of these needs as it relates to the individual in general, and as it relates to the individual's perception of how these needs might be met through successful completion of the goal. When you map values that the individual generally has and the value or the need that individuals see are filled by successful completing the task, you get four possible combinations of mapping. You get high-low, low-high, low-high, low-low, and high-low. Let's look at each one of these four different combinations of value mapping. On one hand, the value associated with the expected performance might be low, and the individual personally values that specific factor is high. So we see the individual has a high sense of need in this area, but they do not perceive that successful outcome of this goal will particularly produce value in that need area. In this case, the leader should find ways to increase the value or perceived value to the individual of successfully accomplishing the task associated with the goal. Next, we may see that the value associated with the expected performance is high, and but the individual personally does not value that, and then it's measured as low. So the individual believes that the need is particularly being met by that outcome, but this individual doesn't particularly have that need. In this case, the leader has a difficult challenge because the individual's values are not easily changed. The leader may seek to develop or find value in the outcome of the desired behavior that would correspond with some other value that the individual has that's high, and find a way to communicate that to the individual. Next, the value associated with the expected performance is low, and the individual personally does not value the specific factor anyway. So we have a low situation. In this case, the leader must find or develop a value associated with successful accomplishment of the task that corresponds with something that the individual values. Otherwise, the individual cannot answer the third question, is it worth it, with a yes. And lastly, we see a high situation, where the value associated with the expected performance is high and the individual personally values that factor in a high way. In this case, the leader should find that the individual is already answering the third question, yes, because of value congruence between the outcome associated with the task and the individual's values. So let's review what we've found here about the factors associated with the EIV model, given to us through the survey taken by the employee. We have 3 questions that must be answered yes in order for the employee to actually put attentional resources toward the behavior and associated outcome in what we call effort. The first question is, can I do it? If I put forth effort, will I in fact perform? The second question, what will I get? In other words, if I perform successfully, will I in fact get the outcome that is expected? And lastly, if I get the outcome, is it worth it? Again, individuals must answer yes to all 3 questions in order to put forth effort toward the behavior and its associated outcome. So let's come back to the task at hand for you and review for a minute. You have received a lecture series explaining leadership and motivation according to the perspective of this lecture series. Secondly, you've been given a survey instrument to give to one of your followers, one of your subordinates, relative to a specific goal that you and this subordinate have established for the coming year ahead. The employee would complete the survey, and you receive back a profile in which we've just discussed what each of the variables in the profile means and some of the considerations you as a leader should take relative to that. So the task at hand for you is to translate the variables given back to you in the profile into your action as a leader to enhance the probability that the individual will successfully accomplish the tasks that are associated with the goal. Here's an example of someone's profile to show you how you might take these variables, or the scores on these variables, and translate it into a leader's action. First of all, personal characteristics. In this particular example, the individual received a moderately high score on mastery, a low score on competitiveness, and a fairly neutral score on worry. So we see the dominant characteristic here is that the employee is somewhat motivated to develop competency. There is some achievement orientation within the personality of the individual. Secondly, on feedback propensity. When asked if external feedback is helpful, this individual scored a high. If feedback is internally driven, they scored a moderately low. So this individual is open to feedback from other people and finds that feedback helpful in performing their task at a higher level. Thirdly, tolerance for ambiguity. This individual is moderately low. This means this individual is more dogmatic than they are open to unclear or ambiguous situations. In this case, the leader is going to have to take special care to clarify or to eliminate complexity out of the situation from the follower's perspective. And lastly, self-esteem, the 2 scores. One is to what degree is self-esteem performance-based or external. In this case, it's low, which means the individual is determining his or her own self-esteem through some internal mechanisms. And secondly, what level is their self-esteem? And it's moderately high. So this individual does consider themselves to be relatively important or a valued contributor of the team.